Hey, good morning, Hillsiders. Reverend Thom here. Our wonderful John Scott Springwater is joining us in the background, and he'll be one of our lectors today. I hope you are all well. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making some space in your day to go within and to connect with us all and with the divine. As always, I hope you can join us at 11:30 for our coffee hour. As always, let me know if you do not get our newsletter or the links. And yeah, I guess we'll leave the chit chat until then and just have a little time together now to go within and reflect. So let's begin this morning, as usual, with some deep breaths. Make yourselves comfortable. Sure that there's not too much tension in our bodies. And let's simply be for a moment. Observe your breath. Observe all of the sensations you're experiencing. Observe the thoughts flowing by in your brain. Observe yourself as the observer. And observe the unchanging presence of the divine at our very center, closer to us than we are to ourselves. Let's be with the open word. Let it speak to us. Let's welcome it as a friend. Who has a beautiful story to tell about ourselves. And as we sit with the word, let's also sit with each other. Let's sit with all living beings around us. Let's take a break from the past and from the future. And simply be. And let's open our inner self to today's readings, beginning with a reading from the Gospel of John.
This is from the Gospel of John, the first chapter, 1 through 14. The Word became flesh. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. This was with him in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth.
The next reading comes from the writings of Emanuel Swedenborg, from Secrets of Heaven. Human rationality alone, if it is not illuminated by the Lord, cannot grasp divine things, not even spiritual things. Only when we are illuminated do we comprehend the Word. The Lord enables those who are illuminated to understand truths and to discern truths in those things which appear to contradict each other. The Word, if read literally, is not consistent with itself. We are illuminated by the Word when we read it from a love of truth and goodness, but not when we do so from a love of reputation, gain, honor, meaning from selfishness. We are illuminated when we live a life of goodness and have an affection for truth. We are illuminated when our inner self is open, and when we are within, our inner self can be raised up into the light of heaven. This illumination is an actual opening of the interiors of our mind, and so an elevation into the light of heaven. So I'm pretty stoked because just recently the new edition of the Kempton Bible came out. You may not have heard of the Kempton Bible. Kempton Bible, you may be familiar with it. It is a Swedenborgian translation of the Bible. It tries to be extra correct with the correspondences, so we can access the inner meaning, and it has annotations to Swedenborg's works. And of course, if you know Swedenborg, you know that his biblical canon, what he considers the word out of the biblical text, is much smaller than the traditional Bible. So, got the Old Testament. You notice it might be slightly smaller. You might notice that in the New Testament, all we have is Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Revelation, which are the books that Swedenborg considers the Word in the New Testament. Now, just looking at this Swedenborgian Bible begs a lot of questions, right? What's the point? What is Swedenborg's idea of what the Word is? What's up with his taking out so much of the New Testament to where only the Gospels and Revelation are left? What is Swedenborg's understanding of what Scripture is? And what is his understanding of what the Word is? And how do these relate? And something that just kind of, in a sense, needs to be addressed is a lot of us have, in our culture, baggage associated with the Bible. I don't have to even say it, I don't think. There's a lot of stuff in the Bible, as well as any ancient religious texts that I'm aware of, that are, if understood literally, not only confusing, but pretty horrible. Pretty horrible stuff in there, right? From murder to jealousy to greed. And often these attributes are associated with divine, which of course doesn't seem to make any sense. And it goes back to a very basic question, which is, how do we view the concept of what the Word is and how the divine communicates with us through sacred text? Now, Swedenborg was very broad in his understanding of what the Word is. One way of saying it is, it's the Bible, or at least the Bible Swedenborg approved of. Another way of saying is that it is Scripture in general. Swedenborg is very clear that the Bible, the Sweetie Bear's Bible, is not the only record of the Word. The Word is something that has existed throughout cultures and predated the Bible. Now, in order to kind of understand where Swedenborg is coming from, I think one has to understand the general tradition that he's coming from. And this is not a uniquely Swedenborgian concept. We have to distinguish between, sorry about the pretentious theological terms, we have to distinguish between the exoteric and the esoteric. And the basic distinction there is the exoteric reading of the Bible, practice of religion, would be based on outward things, on external things, literal things. The esoteric, which Swedenborg is a great example for, Swedenborg's interpretation of Scripture, would be one where we go into the inner sense of Scripture. What is the deeper dynamics that are being communicated through us, through stories, through mythology, through narratives? What does it tell us about ourselves? So God, the God of the Bible, who often seems like a very unsavory character, as well as a lot of the other things, everything in the Bible, every character, every narrative, Swedenborg would say, is an illustration of internal processes that go on within us. The most basic definition of the Word that he gives, that's the most broad, is, this is from Divine Providence. The Word means what is divine truth coming from divine goodness. In other words, divine wisdom from divine love. Of course, he would say is at the core of everything that truly is. Now, what's the whole point of us looking into the Bible, reading the Bible, or any scripture? And you may know that within the history of Swedenborgianism, there has been debate and diverse interpretations and opinions on whether to consider Swedenborg's writings the Word. Because he's pretty clear that any revelatory text that has that inner correspondential meaning, that talks about our inner self in a genuine way, that leads to love and truth, is the Word. So I kind of guess it goes without saying that within the Swedenborgian crowd, we're not particularly known for taking the Bible literally, viewing the Bible more as a symbolic, allegorical, and those are very limited terms, correspondential illustration of our own self. There's these archetypal images, etc., etc. So what's the point then of reading this, right? If the path to the divine, to union with the divine, as Swedenborg says, is to simply live as an embodiment of love and of truth, why do we need these kind of weird, bizarre, trippy texts? I mean, if you look at the New Testament, it's kind of cool, right? I mean, the Gospels are beautiful. You have that beautiful narrative of Christ, which even if you were to understand it literally, is such a beautiful narrative. And I happen to believe it's one of the most profound narratives about our own journey and its own potential. But some of the other stuff, it just kind of seems that it's upsetting, it's weird, there's all these kind of strange images, and might even be harmful if we look at these things as proscriptive, as being guidelines to be meant literally. And Swedenborg is very clear that what makes the Word, what makes sacred scripture sacred, is not something external. It's not bound to words or ideas or stories that are bound in space and time. Scripture to Swedenborg is a tale about ourselves. George Dole wrote a nice little piece called A Book About Us. He writes in his spiritual experience that it should be fully understood that none of us can live a life aligned with the concepts from the Word, the real concepts from the Word, if we don't use those concepts as a basis from which to reflect on our own thoughts, intentions, and deeds, to use them to explore ourselves. So to Swedenborg and many other mystics, the benefits of reading Scripture, of contemplating Scripture, of letting these images speak to us, is that it causes us, it's almost kind of like a mind experience, it causes us to see the deeper things. In a sense, you can compare it to something like dream interpretation, which is how Swedenborg got started on this whole thing. The idea that there are images that are archetypal, that are universal, that speak about what's going on within us. And of course, the Bible is full of this stuff. And I at one point rejected the Bible completely, because I rejected the, frankly, hellish ideas that it presents on the literal. And when I discovered Swedenborg, I started reading this stuff. And I started reading it as these beautiful narratives about things I could see are going on within me. There's an Abraham within me. There's a Moses within me. There's a Mary Magdalene within me. There's a Mary within me, etc., etc., etc. I started seeing what Swedenborg seemed to be seeing, which is that these narratives speak to our inner self. And we can go on and on about examples, and I'm always happy to do that. It's part of what we do here. But, it's one of the great treasures, I believe, of this tradition, is that we have this opportunity to view the Bible, to view sacred text from that inner perspective, which to me gets rid of a lot of the problematic things, a lot of the harmful things. And another thing is that we need to let the word, however we may identify the word, we need to approach it as an inner experience. And I keep saying that inner, right? But to Swedenborg, contemplating the Bible, reading the Bible, or any sacred scripture is truly a mystical experience. If by mystical we understand a direct, intimate experience of the divine. And it's not a matter of faith, so to speak. It's not a matter of buying into certain concepts, buying into certain narratives. It's a tool for self-examination. And he's very clear that there is one single benefit of sacred scripture. And if it doesn't fulfill this benefit, it is not sacred and it is not divine. And that benefit is, does contemplating this, does reading this, does meditating on this make us more truthful, more loving people? That is the ultimate sort of measurement based on Swedenborg. If we read the Bible or any text, and it doesn't make us more loving towards others, and it doesn't make us more inquisitive about actual truth, not what we want to believe, but actual truth. If it does that, it's the word, as far as I'm concerned. And there's that kind of beautiful, again, mystical element of an individual direct experience. And I kind of want to leave us and jump into our conversation with another verse from Swedenborg. And once again, one of the things I just really appreciate about Hillside and about the General Convention of Swedenborgian churches, which were a part of General Convention of the New Jerusalem, is we do not have dogmas. We do not have dogmas. Like I said, there have been different interpretations within Swedenborgianism. There's been schisms about what the word is. Are Swedenborg's writings the word? Are they the Third Testament? What is the word? Which books are in the word? We don't have doctrines. Swedenborg writes in Secrets of Heaven that matters of faith ought to be left to the individual's conscience. So that's another thing that's really important to bear in mind as we explore the Bible, is that, or any sacred text once again, is that it comes to life in a unique way in each individual person. So I'm going to leave us and kind of, I guess, start our conversation with this quote from Secrets of Heaven. It is in keeping with the laws of the divine plan that we ought not to accept truth instantaneously. No one should be persuaded in a single moment that the truth has been proved beyond all doubt. This is because truth imprinted this way becomes merely expedient truth and lacks reach. Such truth is represented in the other world as rigid and impervious to any good influence that would make it usable. On that account, as soon as plain experience in the other world presents good spirits with any true idea, an opposing thought is presented right afterward to raise doubt. This allows them to think and ponder whether the idea is so, gather arguments, and thus use reason to introduce the truth into their mind. Doing so extends their range of spiritual vision on the subject all the way to its opposite. As a result, their intellect sees and perceives the entire nature of truth, which enables them to let heaven's influence in according to their state. Truth takes various shapes depending on circumstances. So again, if there is one kind of reflection I want to leave us with as we engage, and we may choose not to engage sacred text, the one thing that I would leave us with today is to remember that, based on Swedenborg, the greatest benefit of reading sacred scripture, once again, is reading it as a story of us, and to allow for that mystical experience of realizing that this stuff, it's not talking about what happened historically when the waters were split, when the blind were healed, etc., etc. Or does it? But it is really talking about our very intimate personal lives. So I'm sure there'll be some awesome discussion today about what the word is, what it is not, and I, of course, am excited to hear the many diverse experiences and opinions y'all may have, including that, the Bible just doesn't work for you as a tool to get closer to God. But the word does, right? By means of Swedenborgian, in the Swedenborgian understanding, right? That which brings us closer to love and truth. Before we merge into our virtual coffee hour and have some more convo, let's center ourselves again. Take some breaths. Allow ourselves to simply be with what we just heard, what I just said, the readings. Let's be with how we're feeling. Without judgment, without attachment, without a need to believe. Let's once again simply be. And let's see if that inner self, if that inner word can sense and be with each other's inner self in this moment. Let's enter into conscious, angelic community with each other. And whatever your internal word looks like, it may be an open Bible, it may be a tree, maybe a word, maybe a bird. Let's approach it. Let's sit with it. And let's commit ourselves to contemplating, engaging, and living whatever it is that makes us more loving, more truthful, and thus more in union with the divine. Let's sit with each other's cares, with each other's hopes, and once again trust that our own inner word will guide us as to how we can bless each other and all beings. So mote it be. Again, hope to see you at coffee hour, hope to chat some more. And we'll see you in a little bit. Thank you, John Scott, for being with us. I hope you'll be around too, so we'll have some good discussion. I know John Scott, him and I have been talking, so sure there'll be some good, juicy discussion. And I'm sure we'll talk some more about the New Kempton Bible. I'm just so stoked about it. I'm sorry. I'm a Bible nerd and I'm a Swedenborg nerd. So first edition came out in 2011. It was very bulky. It's this one. So I'm stoked about this. Anyways, looking forward to catching up. Hope you're doing well. Peace and power.